Hi, good morning, everybody. This is Mr. Raider. This is EP World History, and today we're going to be looking at is Stalin and the Russian Revolution. And we want to think about specifically continuity and change over time. And we want to consider how the Soviet Union, the USSR, changed under Joseph Stalin. There were a lot of changes that did take place following the revolution, the October Revolution of 1917. So as a reminder, we will have a Zoom meeting today at 2 p.m. I want to check in with everybody, see how everybody is doing with remote learning, how you guys are managing your time, sleep schedules, and things of that nature so that I can do whatever I can on my end to best support you moving forward. You will see there are a couple of documents that we're going to be looking at today. So for the opening question, there's going to be two photographs side by side with some associated context information. What I'd like you to respond to is to kind of consider what happened, why it happened, and what purpose it would serve for Joseph Stalin. So this is a image, or is a photograph. So the photograph on the left was taken at the 14th Party Conference in April 1925. It was a year after Joseph Stalin took over following the stroke and death of Vladimir Lenin, who was one of the founders, leaders of the Russian Revolution of 1917. Stalin is the sixth man from the left. This is Joseph Stalin right here. However, in two later biographies of Stalin published in 1939, so 14 years later, and 1949, 24 years later, the photograph on the right was used to depict the 14th Party Conference in April 1925. And it's apparent that the photographs were retouched, modified, and people were removed in an attempt to alter history. Stalin often did this to manipulate historical records to suit his own agenda. It should also be noted that the vast majority of the men in the picture on the left died due to unnatural causes. So those are some things to kind of keep in mind when we consider how an historical narrative is created and how manipulating photographs as one form of selection bias can irrevocably shift the way in which information is kept and maintained, particularly if, for example, we were to lose this image to history and all we had was this, we would see a very different story than if we saw the whole thing. Okay. So there are four documents. Two of them are from Stalin himself: the international situation, the tasks of the communist parties, the results of the first 5 year plan, and then two other documents, and they confessed, speaking about the trials that had existed under Stalin's purges, and Solzhenitsyn's One Day in the Life of Ivan Denisovich. And we want to consider again how the Soviet Union changed under the leadership of Stalin. I'm going to ask that you read two of the four documents and to be able to write responses. If you'd like to read all four, that's great, but I really want you to read at least two. And I want you to gather evidence of specific changes that took place in the Soviet Union under Stalin's rule. And part of our discussion later today will be to look at these documents in aggregate and to really consider what were the consequences for the Soviet Union as a result of Joseph Stalin taking over. And then, did the benefits of Stalinism ultimately outweigh its consequences on daily life? So, I'm actually going to put today's assignment up as a discussion post. And what I'd like you to do is to copy and paste your notes and your understandings of the documents with your classmates, and then collectively. And I think this is going to really happen both in the discussion board for those of you who aren't able to join us at 2 p.m. for the Zoom meeting, but also just verbally in our Zoom meeting to answer this guiding question. So, did the benefits of Stalinism outweigh its consequences on daily life? And then for the summary, two questions to consider. One, like, why did Stalin attempt to industrialize the Soviet Union? So there was some profound consequences of doing so. So if you remember back to our unit essential question, why was the 20th century the century of unresolved conflicts? One of the main motivating factors for Soviet industrialization and investment in heavy industry was so that the Soviet Union could compete with the other powers following the end of the First World War. Okay. So the documents themselves, there are two documents. So the first one is the classwork document that I'm going to ask you all to work in and to respond to. And again, you can see all the information here. These are all the documents. So international situation, sourcing information, make sure that you look at the context as you look at each of the documents. And again, just like with every type of activity we're doing, in this case, we're looking for evidence of specific changes that took place. So make comments on things that are relevant in terms of change. Okay. And I'm going to bring this up in our Zoom conference, but I would like to be able to have a seminar with you all this upcoming Tuesday at 2 p.m. as well. It's on an article called War and the Environment. This is actually going to be Monday's lesson. If you see it, it says lesson 119, War and the Environment, March 30th. But I know many of you do like to be able to have plenty of time to work on these articles, so I will give you that time. This is a slightly abridged version, so part one is the same, considering vocabulary, who the writer is, and how the writer's background biases and influences their writing, and then considering point of view. For part two, I'm just going to ask you to pull out one quote that you think is really important as opposed to two, and to consider making those connections, text to self and to world. Okay. Part three is going to be the same. I did reduce the length of the writing from 2 to 3 to 1 to 2. And then this is the article itself. If you want to see the full article, I did hyperlink it. I excerpted the majority of the article itself. It's a relatively short read. It's about 6 pages, and it goes through essentially wars throughout human history. And if you look at the numbers, these just correspond to endnotes, which if you look at the end of the article, really looking at essentially the top here, the notes, they just break down all the information as to where all of these documents came from. And that will do it for today. I look forward to seeing you all at 2 o'clock for our Zoom meeting, and I hope that you enjoy the rest of your day.